Good evening, I'm Grace Brown in Hong Kong and welcome to ViuTV News. Coming up on tonight's show. Hong Kong's Secretary for Labour and Welfare hits back at criticism that elderly care in the city isn't good enough, suggesting some don't understand how his bureau works. Andy Chan makes his first appearance in public since the Hong Kong National Party was banned by police. He says he's not a national security threat. Plus, Hong Kong's solar power problem, pro-establishment lawmaker Junius Ho likens renewable action in the city to a brick wall. Good evening. The Secretary for Welfare and Labour has today hit back at young critics for not understanding how public policies are formed. Lord Chi Kwong was defending his team from social workers who say the government doesn't take care enough to take quicker action in helping the elderly. Diane To reports.
You don't understand. That's Lord Chi Kwong's opinion about young social workers in Hong Kong after some criticise the government's elderly services programme plan. The accusation is that Law's Labour and Welfare Bureau has been dragging its feet over elderly care. Today, he shot back that the younger social workers making those claims don't understand how public planning works. Speaking to ViuTV News this week, Law said problems with data collection meant that debates were often based on old trends.
If you want to measure what the current state or what the government has done, you probably have to wait for 2 years before the figures will be coming out whether today we have been doing enough.
He also faced questions this week about the government's work with ethnic minorities, and in particular, the difficulty with getting jobs in the city. That's after ViuTV News spoke with one young Nepalese Hong Konger who said there was a systemic bias about the careers that people like her were offered.
Within the education system itself, we're usually pushed towards vocational jobs. So when you constantly push us to become waitresses, maybe managers, maybe work in hotels, that's the kind of reality that becomes of us. Because I feel like if you tell us that we can become doctors, we can become nurses, we can become journalists, maybe we would. But the thing is, we don't even know that these job opportunities are available for us.
Law believes there's nothing wrong with being a waitress or hotel worker. But he said the jobs issue comes down to the Chinese language barrier and noted there has been a greater push in recent years to help non-Chinese students pick up the language better. The Labour chief has suggested some of Hong Kong's younger generations might be nostalgic for welfare policies from the 1990s. Whether or not that's true doesn't change the fact that there are still big questions over how the government is protecting the city's most vulnerable.
Well, you can catch the rest of our interview with the Secretary for Labour and Welfare, Dr. Lord Chi Kwong, on the weekly review in just under 2 hours at 9 p.m. Well, Law's comments on the elderly come as a new study shows there's been a surge in senior citizens rejoining the workforce since 2010. Researchers say it could be due to the recently implemented minimum wage. The ACE Centre for Business and Economic Research said the number of workers aged 65 and above grew from fewer than 80,000 people in 1982 to nearly 130,000 in recent years. Researchers said that after the minimum wage began in 2011, those in low-income jobs, such as in manufacturing and hospitality, doubled in number. They said the government should set up more employment schemes for the city's retirees to lure them back into the workforce. Andy Chan's made his first appearance in public since his Hong Kong National Party was banned this week by police. It comes as former lawmaker Albert Ho described the ban as a violation of the Bill of Rights in the city, which guarantees freedom of speech and freedom of association. Almond Lee has the story.
It's been less than a week since Andy Chan's Hong Kong National Party was banned by police. So his first appearance in public today was being watched closely. Speaking at the RTHK City Forum in Victoria Park, this was his chance to tell his supporters and the public what he was going to do next. He stands accused of threatening national security. 800 pages of documents were sent by authorities, detailing his words and deeds over the last 2 years as the party's convener.
If making speeches is a threat to national security, there are a lot of people who should be arrested and a lot of organizations which should be banned.
National People's Congress Deputy Ma Fong Kwok said the National Party's calls for independence are proof enough of a threat.
What they have been advocating and promoting when they founded the organization and over the past 2 years crosses the red line of national security.
While the crowds weren't huge at the event, there was clear support for Ma's argument. Even among those who don't support independence, though, there was a sense of injustice at the outright ban.
We have a Bill of Rights and the International Bill of Human Rights in Hong Kong. So, we must follow international standards on this issue. That does not include persecution based on speeches. They alone cannot be seen as a national security threat.
It's unclear who might hear such arguments, though. As the Basic Law Committee Deputy Director Maria Tam said this afternoon, Beijing has already made its stance clear. Calling for independence is indeed threatening national security.
Pro-establishment lawmaker Junius Ho had some strong words today for the government after running into what he called a bureaucratic brick wall. He's upset over restrictions over installing solar panels on village houses. Speaking on RTHK's letter to Hong Kong, Ho pushed for revisions to clean energy policies like the feed-in tariff scheme. Though he praised it, he added that it was fairly hard to join. Under the initiative, the city's power companies could buy electricity generated by solar panels at rates of up to $5 per unit. That's over a payback period that could last as long as 10 years for a typical house. Despite his criticism, it's still a scheme he said Hong Kongers could follow through, though, unlike in Macau.
If all 40,000 plus village-type houses throughout the new territories is willing to participate, it will certainly attain a huge achievement in carbon emission reduction. We certainly don't want to repeat the folly of our neighbour city, Macau, as they have since the implementation of the FIT scheme in 2015 only had fewer than 10 participants to join.
Police are searching for 3 Southeast Asian men over a robbery near the Hong Kong mainland border, which has left the victim hospitalized. The incident happened at around 9 a.m. in a parking lot on Lok Ma Chau Road. That's when a man returning from the mainland was reportedly attacked by 3 South Asian men with a hammer. He was robbed of around 800,000 yuan in cash. The victim was injured in the head and is recovering in the North District Hospital. Meanwhile, 9 people have been arrested in Hong Kong and the mainland over the July 1st smash-and-grab robbery in a joint operation between local and Shenzhen police. Last week, 3 men and a woman were arrested in the city for their role in the case, which saw over $23 million worth of jewellery stolen from a Tsim Sha Tsui shop. Local police sought help from Shenzhen authorities after suspecting the stolen goods had been transported to the mainland. Law enforcement agents there arrested 3 Hong Kong men and 2 mainlanders, recovering 12 watches and around $1.7 million in cash. The Democratic Party said today it's helping a 22-year-old woman who claims she's a victim of identity fraud. That's after a bank told her to repay an $82,000 loan she allegedly never took. The victim said reporters found the money in her bank account after an anonymous caller told her he had mistakenly transferred it there. After returning the money to him, the Bank of East Asia notified her to repay a loan of $82,000. Bank staff claimed she had confirmed her identity before they granted the loan. Lawmaker Andrew Wan has blasted the bank for its lax security over the loan process and for threatening the victim's family so she would repay the money.
Trying to shift the responsibility to another victim so as to avoid the loss of the money. That is unacceptable. And I urge the bank try to avoid this loan installment and do not harass my victim anymore. Do not send any person to their home for chasing the money.
Coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Well, we start with local worries over the global trade war. As tensions between the US and China rise, Hong Kong businesses are increasingly concerned about what the fallout means for them. On his blog today, Financial Secretary Paul Chan said trading and logistics firms are already suffering. He added that fluctuations in the stock market and banking industry are also threatening the local economy. Despite the growing worries, though, Chan said Hong Kong's financial system is strong enough to withstand the impact and has told people not to worry. He added the city's $430 billion of foreign exchange reserves are enough to shield it from being hit further. But he's also called for the US to resolve the row with Beijing. Well, looking ahead to this week, and Hong Kong inflation data for June is out tomorrow. May's consumer price index showed costs in the city climbed 2.1%. That's largely in line with policymakers' expectations. They said earlier this year that robust economic conditions would continue to drive increases in the rate of price growth. Trade data is due on Friday, meanwhile, with investors and economists paying close attention to the wake of soaring trade tensions between the US and China. Exports rose significantly according to data out last month, which imports were also up heavily. Hong Kong could yet find itself hit hard by the global tariff row. That dispute was certainly the focus of an International Monetary Fund meeting yesterday. The IMF has warned world economic leaders that the recent wave of trade tariffs will significantly harm global growth. Nathan Frandino has the details.
Despite the smiles and pleasantries between International Monetary Fund Director Christine Lagarde and her Argentine host at the G20 meeting in Buenos Aires this weekend, she brought words of caution to the party. At a news conference Saturday, she said the recent wave of trade tariffs would significantly harm global growth.
But it certainly indicates the impact that it would have on GDP, which in the worst case scenario, under current measures and not taking into account most recent announcement, is in the range of 0.5% of GDP on a global basis.
In a note to G20 ministers, she said global growth may peak at 3.9% in 2018 and 2019, while downside risks have increased due to the growing trade conflict. Those trade tariffs mainly coming from the White House, where U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday threatened tariffs on all $500 billion of Chinese exports to the U.S. The threat comes after both countries have already slapped tariffs on $34 billion worth of each other's goods. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin has downplayed any harm from the moves, saying there has been no macro effect on the U.S. economy, and adding that while there has been some retaliation against some U.S. goods like soybeans, lobsters, and bourbon, he believes it won't be enough to stop the U.S. from achieving a 3% growth rate this year.
Okay, time now for a short break, but when we come back, we'll be taking a look at upcoming elections in Cambodia and one woman's struggle and hopes for her unborn child.
We enrage.